Welcome back to Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoph, and in this video, we're going to be discussing Locke's Big Three for the shoulder. This is very similar to McGill's Big Three for the core that we talked about in a separate video, but now we're talking about the shoulder. And this treatment approach is very, very useful in a clinical setting. So I had a patient going back maybe a year ago who came into me with bilateral shoulder pain. It was a little bit worse on one side than the other. I don't remember which side that was, but he had bilateral shoulder pain. And he was a guy that frequented the gym. He did a lot of resistance training. So whenever I have a patient that comes in on day one for the evaluation, they got shoulder pain, and they go to the gym, I always ask, what exercises do you do for the shoulder? And this is what he said. He says, I do bench press, I do incline press, I do decline press, and I do pec flies. I'm dead serious, that's what he said. And my follow-up to that is, do you do anything like rows or lat pull-downs, pull-ups, etc., things for the back side of the upper body? And he said no, he just did those chest exercises. And presumptively, there's your problem, like right there. You're working the anterior chain of the shoulder, heavily working the anterior chain, and there is a muscle imbalance in strength between the anterior and posterior shoulder. And so if we can get the posterior shoulder stronger, which it did end up being weaker, then we're likely to get rid of that shoulder pain. And so we focus pretty heavily on strengthening the posterior shoulder. And part of that treatment approach, not all of it, but part of it, was Locke's Big Three. So if you're watching this video and you have shoulder pain, just understand that Locke's Big Three is not necessarily going to get rid of your shoulder pain. But if there is posterior shoulder weakness, it could definitely be a component of the rehab for that shoulder pain. So in general, the purpose of Locke's Big Three is to improve activation and strength of the posterior shoulder muscles, which can be used obviously if they're weak, but also if you want to prep the shoulder for increased stability prior to advanced or heavy lifts requiring shoulder stability, particularly above the head shoulder stability, like the snatch or other Olympic lifts, and then even things like bench or overhead press. So most likely with that patient, when he was doing bench press type of movements, he had insufficient posterior shoulder stability, and that was contributing to his shoulder pain, which was actually primarily localized around the AC joint on both sides. Okay? Understand, it can be used as a treatment approach for shoulder pain, but it is not a cure for shoulder pain. You need to do a thorough examination on somebody to figure out all the impairments. And in all likelihood, there's probably going to be some posterior shoulder weakness, and you can use this as part of that treatment approach, but it's not the entire treatment approach. That being said, the target muscles are around the shoulder girdle and the rotator cuff. So the shoulder girdle muscles that we're mainly hitting here are going to be the middle traps and the rhomboids. The rotator cuff muscles that we're hitting are infraspinatus and teres minor. Now for all three exercises here, we're going to have the same general dosage. You're going to perform between 15 and 20 repetitions per exercise, and they're going to be slow and controlled repetitions. When I say slow, I don't mean a snail's pace, but you also shouldn't be doing things at a rate like that, okay? You want to control the movement, feel the muscles activate, and I always like squeezes and maybe a short hold at the top of each movement. And then when you lower, it's with control. So someone once said, pretend an egg's on the floor or whatever's beneath your arm. Pretend there's an egg, and you want to touch the egg on the way down, but you don't want to crush, you don't want to break the egg. That's the kind of repetition we're going to be doing. Let's take a look at the three exercises right now. Now, all three exercises here are done in the prone position, so on your stomach. I'm doing it on a treatment table, so my arms do have the potential of hanging over the edge. However, if you're a beginner doing this, I highly recommend getting down on the floor if you're able to, because that's going to limit your range of motion, which you want. We want the arms really to begin right in line with the coronal or the frontal plane of the body and only moving behind that. If you start with your arms way in front of your body and you're doing some of these exercises, you're going to engage other muscles that we don't necessarily want to activate here, like the lats, for example. It's not saying you don't want to ever strengthen the lats, but the goal here is to strengthen these other muscles of the posterior shoulder. The lats tend to be active when your arms are in front of your body, but once your arms get to that frontal plane and behind, the lats are much less active. So it allows us to isolate those muscles that I showed you on the previous slide a lot better. Okay? So this first one is horizontal abduction. See what that looks like right here. So basically, the arms begin at about 90 degrees of shoulder abduction. And you can't see it here in this view, but my palms are face down. So the palms are facing the floor. And I bring up, I squeeze, and then come back down with control. Remember, I'm pretending there's an egg under my hand or my forearm as my arms are coming back down. Now, with any of these exercises, if you want to bias more the rotator cuff muscles, just cue the patient to not squeeze the shoulder blades as they're coming up. If you did want more of that shoulder girdle activation, middle traps, rhomboids, then you do cue the patient to squeeze their shoulder blades on the way up. Again, if you don't squeeze the shoulder blades, it's not to say that you're going to eliminate action of the middle traps and rhomboids, but you'll get a little bit more bias of the rotator cuff muscles. And then the next exercise here is prone shoulder extension. So now my arms are no longer in abduction, they're by my sides, okay, between 0 and 10 degrees. You'll also notice that my palms are face up. This is putting my shoulder more in an internally rotated position, okay? In the internally rotated position, it's much easier to get your arms closer to your sides. And we follow the same rules here, 15 to 20 repetitions, slow controlled repetitions with a little hold or squeeze at the top, and then lower down with control, trying not to crush that egg. The third exercise is very similar to this, but there's one difference. We're still doing prone shoulder extension here, but now the palms are face down. You can see it better over here on my left side. This puts the shoulder in an externally rotated position. Now in this position for a lot of people, particularly big guys, it's going to be harder to get the arms by the sides, so you might have to have the arms abducted just a little bit. But the key difference here is it's not abducted to 90 degrees. You want to keep it as close to your side as possible, but it's going to be harder to keep it as close as it was in the internally rotated position. So this is basically prone shoulder extension, but now shoulders are externally rotated. And again, we follow these same rules as before. Dosage, 15 to 20 repetitions, slow and controlled. So hopefully this video gave you a good understanding of Lock's Big 3 for the posterior shoulder. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification button for notifications for all videos in the future. Thank you so much.